So next is the market size. Obviously, we are in a global industry for the airline, so about everybody is involved with the airline industry. About for how many miles that the airline industry has traveled in 2018 is about 40 billion miles. And also about 4 billion people have traveled. Currently, at the end of 2018, about 4 billion people traveled just by aircraft alone. For market growth, so in the early 1950s, like we stated, only about 5 to 10 people traveled in the airline and traveled by aircraft, and that was just executives for airline companies. Like in the previous slide, about 4 billion people traveled just at the end of 2018 by aircraft, but for forecasting, in 2036, that number is from 4 billion is to increase to 7.8 billion passengers will fly by aircraft in that time frame. Forecasting by country for traveling is about 921 million people will travel out of China. In the United States, 401 million passengers. In India, 337 million. Indonesia, 235 million. Why do people travel by air? For the connectivity. They want to explore different cultures. They want to interact with different people. They want to go see loved ones that are in other countries. And that is bringing an increase in demand for that. With the increase in demand for the growth of this market, infrastructure is a big challenge for airline industries. They're going to have to expand airports. They're going to have to improve, regroute the runways and make them longer for these bigger MAX 8 planes. And also ground access for like parking garages is going to need to be improved and increased as well. So trends, airline companies do their research for upcoming trends. They have data sets. They do publication. They look at publications. They look at different global reports. They do think tanks. They also do surveys and polls, and even look at blogs. So the two main big trends that are happening is in African and Asian Pacific flights. A lot of people are going to explore Africa due to like the new trends, and they want global aging and middle class. They want to go explore new cultures before they are no longer allowed. Many people go for regional holidays. They want to go explore those countries during those countries' national holidays and see what it's like in that region during holidays. This is also just promoting tourism and allowing people to go into different countries. Like recently, where some airlines, but it's mainly private, are going to like South Korea or China. China has increased its tourism, allowing people to experience their culture better. E-business is also a huge trend now, allowing customers to buy and do their research all online instead of calling over the phone and asking for these prices. So this is a strategic use for many airline companies for information, allowing companies to connect with their customers. It also just speeds up the process for people purchasing their airline tickets. That you can either do it computer, tablet, or even on your cell phone. You can all do it electronically. So the Porter 5 Forces. So bargaining power of buyers is about a moderate rate. It has very large number of buyers. 4 billion people in the world are traveling by air. With the moderate force, there are two different types of groups. There are individuals and business, and there's also travel agencies and online portals. So the individuals, like just me and you, going to go travel for business or just for pleasure. And then there's also agencies and online portals. Those are for your bigger parties, for family reunions, weddings, funerals, or various other things. You also have the issue with the moderate. You also have the reduce of switching costs. So people can go to different companies, like switching from Delta to Southwest, or going to American Airlines, and changing brands, or you can change some. They can change travel agencies, or they can switch products. So you can go from business to economy or first class. You have different products that they are offering. So bargaining power of suppliers is weak. There's only two main airline body, so the main aircraft. There's only two main suppliers, and that is Boeing and Airbus. The only difference between those two, they have the same structure for all airplanes. They have to have the same structure. The only difference between the two is one is in Europe. Airbus is in France. Their headquarters is located in France, while Boeing is in the United States, up in Seattle. For engines, there are about three main companies. There's GE, Rolls-Royce, and Northrop. Rolls-Royce has been producing as the main producer for most aircraft engines. They've been producing aircraft engines since World War II. And the engines are leased. They are not sold because that prevents liabilities for the airline companies, and so they are not responsible for the damages of those engines. They're only responsible for the anything that goes on in the aircraft. There is just a low switch cost. You really can't switch bodies. You can't really switch suppliers. It's very difficult to go from Boeing to Airbus or switching engines, because it's going to take a long process. It's going to put that plane out of commission, and so it just takes way too long, and so there's really not a switch cost for that for suppliers. New threat of entries is very weak. It is very expensive to enter into the airline industry. It costs about $1 million to $1 billion just for a single aircraft from either Boeing or Airbus. So there's not really a switch cost for that. If you want to enter this industry, you have a lot of things to do with the DOT. You have to send your manifest monthly. You have to put your fleet. You have to send your fleet to them as well. Any changes you make to your company, all financials, and you have to also send a list of management and employees to the DOT. For threats of substitutes is about moderate. There are different forms of transportation. So you can either go car, train, boat. There are different modes of transportation depending on what you want to pay and how fast you want to get there. Like cars, if you want to travel by car, that's more flexible. You can do it on your time, but could be expensive due to gas prices. Airline companies are your fastest source of transportation, but it is one of the most expensive sources of transportation. And then boat is really for your cargo purposes. And then finally we have rivalry among existing players that is strong. There are so many airline companies there now. There's really no new threats. All the prices are about the same. They're all regulated. But the only difference is the companies, customer service, and what they're offering in their products. So that's what is basically the rivalry between existing companies in the airline industry. If there is a new entry, those airline companies the larger ones will try to help those passengers, but mainly those smaller ones are just gonna go bankrupt, and those larger ones are going to swoop in, buy them out, and then add those planes to its manifest, or just sell those parts. There's four driving forces for the airline industry. Technology is a big one. Mainly all airline programs are now offering IT programs, which advance dramatically for their function, adding for your tablets and your smartphones, making everything accessible through those products. There is an EFB research project going on that is all tablet based. That driver is the technology for in the cabins. There are tablets, and if you can watch movies, play games, and that helps flight attendants, gate agents, and the frontline employees. And it's all tablet based. The main challenge for this is the new emerging technology, which is adding accessing and leverage for all the data in real cost and real time. and then investments as well. There's new opportunities to grow in technology. For environmental fuel, many airline companies are trying to go eco-friendly. So right now, most airlines are using jet fuel, which is a crude oil feedstock, but they're trying to find alternative means using distilled crude process or converting using coal, gas, or biomass fuels and hydrocarbon. Biofuels are potential to provide emerging savings, renewable sources unlike fossil fuels, and creating a new supply concern. Biofast feedstock is a pathway of this driving force. It is an airline company's realization of combustion fuel prices will eventually drop, hopefully, but right now they're increasing, so this is making a huge issue for airline companies. Foreign ownership. So the United States only allows about 25% of non-U.S. owned ships. If you want to get U.S. owned, those planes need to become citizenized for temporary use, just to go in and out of traveling purposes. So there are bilateral agreements that many airline companies have to follow, which includes the carriers, the routes, the type of traffic, and it's granted to use into those companies. You have cross-border mergers, which involves your bilateral agreements, but it's separated. This involves the government, and this is trying to prevent merging, and will help reduce fuel prices as well. There's also another consequence with cross-border. There is bilateral agreements, and those are the two mergers. Will try to limit the number of mergers. The final driving force is alliances and mergers. Less than 5% of all alliances will eventually just end up as merging companies. There's two reasons why companies will merge or become alliance. Either the flexibility, since this market is up and down with uncertainty, and there's also just the sheer size of financial resources. Many companies will either